This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Get charged up for action that'll shock your system.
Tell me that's not cool.
An unstoppable superhero and his crew embark on impossible missions and will bring mutated villains to justice.
When Static's in the house, bad guys better step off.
Pull the plug on crime with the adventures of Static Shock. Yeah!
Welcome, everyone, to episode 320 of the DCAU Review. I am Liam, and with me, as he always is Cal. Cal, it's the final week of July, which means for the time being, it's our final week in the sunny skies of Dakota, though this week, those skies aren't so sunny.
Yeah, it's interesting. We always refer to them as sunny skies because so many of the episodes take place during the daytime, as was probably some sort of directive from the show's producers and or the network, perhaps, that they wanted it to be bright and cheery as opposed to some of the darker themes that we see in Batman. But yeah, this episode, as you mentioned, which is entitled Army of Darkness, poetically, takes place almost exclusively at nighttime, and there's a lot of good reason for that, as we have several different characters here that are introduced to Static, some new Bang Babies, but of course also a returning big baddie member of Static's Rogues Gallery. So excited to chat about this episode with you today on episode 320.
Absolutely. And before we get into our four main categories of plot, visuals, music, and voice acting, where we'll have a score, each of us will have a score for each of those categories. Before we get there, I must, of course, start us off with the official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, Army of Darkness. And that synopsis is brought to you by the Pod Tower YouTube channel. Get head to youtube.com/the Pod Tower right now. You could subscribe, and you'll not only get every episode that we produce, as well as some shorts and other fun stuff from us. You also get every episode of the currently ongoing Jump on the Bat-Wagon podcast, where James from Watchtower Database and his friend Brian run through the DCAU in air date order, as well as the back catalog of the show Tim Talk and several other goodies, live stream archives, lots of good stuff over at the Pod Tower. So head to youtube.com/the Pod Tower today.
And Liam, before you get into the official IMDb synopsis, so I'll let you know that this episode originally aired on the Kids WB here in the States on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2004, meaning we just this very year passed the 20-year anniversary of this episode's debut.
How about that? Yes. So with all that out of the way, this is the official synopsis for Army of Darkness, not the Bruce Campbell movie, the episode of Static Shock. Obviously, we wouldn't be talking about the Bruce Campbell show on here. That just wouldn't make sense. Army of Darkness, written by John Semper Jr., directed by Mark Howard, with music by Stanley Clark and Max Gauss, or Gauss. Apologies if I'm butchering that. And animation by Dong Wu. And that synopsis reads as such. Static and Gear face off against a group of Bang Babies bent on covering Dakota City in darkness.
Why do they call it Dakota City?
Well, I was going to say, they've never once called it Dakota City. They just call it Dakota.
Yeah.
It's like how you know the person's a tourist. They call it Dakota City. They're not from here.
Correct.
But yes, as far as the synopsis go, that's pretty generic. That's maybe acceptable for a TV guide. But we'll get into a more thorough breakdown of the plot here as we open up with Static patrolling late at night in the city of Dakota when he hears an alarm going off, and he happens upon a jewelry store. He sees a young woman wearing sunglasses at night. And apparently that's not just a fashion choice, as we're introduced to the first three members of the Nightbreed, though we don't know that yet. As he's talking with this girl, who we find out later is named Nightingale, or just Gale. He's speaking things when all of a sudden that alarm gets a lot louder and the doors break open, and we see two more members a large woman who we come to know as Brickhouse, and a guy who can phase through things called Fade. It's called Fade.
Fade. Yep, that's Fade.
Excuse me, but shouldn't you be home asleep?
I wish I could go home.
Hey, no problem. I'll give you a lift.
Thanks, but it's not that simple.
Uh-oh. Let me guess. The wedding's this morning and you two waited till the last minute to pick out the ring. Brickhouse, run! Leave us alone! I can't help myself. You both seem like such fun people to hang with.
So there's a little bit of a scuffle with Static as he deals with those two, not realizing that Nightingale, the girl with the purple hair, is actually part of this little merry bandits. And she unleashes her powers, which, as it turns out, are to create literal darkness. You know how Shade's cane works in Justice League? She does that with her hands. That's the best way I can describe Nightingale's powers. So Static is a little bit lost in the darkness, and they're able to escape with their ill-gotten gains. Lots of diamonds, as we find out. And Static eventually is able to find his way after smacking into a light post outside. He's able to dissipate the darkness, but he is kind of left scratching his head, trying to figure out what exactly just happened. And as we see this group of thieves return to their lair in this old abandoned subway tunnel, we are greeted as they begin to discuss what their next move will be. We're introduced to their boss, who, as Cal mentioned, is a villain very familiar to those viewers of Static Shock. It's the returning Ebon, who has found himself a new crew here. None of the usual meta breed are along. It's this new crew of people, and as they're discussing things and they begin to walk further into their lair, we notice that the sun is coming up, and as Nightingale stands in the way of the sun for a moment, we see her sort of react, and we see almost like steam coming off of her as she runs for cover from the light. So whatever's going on here, it's clear that Ebon's got a new crew, and they don't like light.
Too close, girl.
I didn't want him to get hurt.
Forget him, Nightingale. It's us you should be worrying about.
Let her go, Fade. I tripped the alarm, so Static was my fault. What, you want to fight me?
Pathetic. I leave you infants alone for one night and y'all can't behave. No wonder you need me to run things. Get the diamonds?
Yeah, but we had to tangle with Static. You swipe the microchips?
You even need to ask? Now let's go see if Brain Boy really knows how to use this stuff.
Yo, Brick. Thanks.
Whatever. Just don't push your luck.
Yeah, that's right. Not only that, but we get hints here that Nightingale might not exactly be on board with everything that they're doing. We were sort of alluded to that when Static has the initial conversation with her outside of the break-in, where she mentions that she wishes she could go home. And then here, as they return, Brickhouse and Fade are asking why she didn't join in the chicanery to try and take down Static and Gear. So or just Static, not Gear yet, but take down Static. So yeah, there's some stuff that's being alluded to here. We learn a little bit about what's going on here as we're introduced to the fourth member of the Nightbreed, and that is Tech, who seems to be the antithesis, at least on the side of good versus evil, from Richie. So he's super smart, but he's also got the same yellow eyes. All of the guys have these really like kind of fish-like looking, or not fish-like eyes. I guess they're like snake eyes or something.
Yeah, like reptile eyes for sure.
Yeah, they're like reptilian. They all have these matching yellow eyes with these kind of black pupils in the middle of them. So he is working on something, a contraption that is worked on and is apparently fueled by diamonds. Ebon mentions that he stole some diamonds in the process, and through some exposition and mumbo jumbo of science, apparently the refraction of light is going to create a additional dark matter, and so much dark matter that it's going to dwarf the amount that Nightingale herself can create. And because she's limited from her power source. So this machine is going to be able to produce and create dark matter all on its own. So Ebon mentions that they are still short one individual component to finish the device, and they have to go out and get it. But at this point, since Static is on to them, that they're going to have to watch their backs. And that's where we flash. Not only does he say they have to watch their backs, but that Static won't rest until he finds them, which is we get a comedic cut to Static sleeping on a rooftop, being awakened by Richie.
Yo, Static! Huh? What? You fell asleep again, just like you did in chemistry class. Oh, sorry. Well, at least you're not lighting a Bunsen burner this time.
I guess I'm not cut out for these all-nighters.
I don't know how Batman does it. In real life, he's probably some rich guy who gets to sleep all day. He is, isn't he? Come on, you know.
I'm not saying anything.
Uh-oh. It's a metahuman APB.
Where are they?
Dakota nuclear reactor.
We get a couple of name checks. Batman mentioned here. We get Batman mentioned where Richie guesses that he might be the reason why Batman is successful at what he does is that he may be a rich guy that can sleep all day. Static is noticeably silent, at which point Gear jumps on it and says that I'm right, aren't I? I'm right, which is a very funny line. In the midst of this discussion, Backpack alerts both Static and Gear that there's been a break-in and that they need to head over to the Dakota nuclear reactor. Did we know that was a thing before? Dakota has it all. Mountains.
A lot going on here.
Mountains, bridges, nuclear reactors. It truly is the major.
It's a walking supervillain factory is what it is.
Yeah, indeed. So they head to the nuclear reactor. What did she know? It's the same group of metahumans that they had previously run into. And this time they are accompanied by Tech, who is the fourth member, as we mentioned. And before they can get away with something, their attempt to get away with what appears to be a barrel of some kind, perhaps nuclear waste, Static and Gear jump into action, are able to prevent them from getting away. However, Ebon shows up and ends up overpowering Static and Gear, dropping them nearly into the core of the nuclear reactor, which I don't know how. Maybe I should have done my research to understand how nuclear reactors, but they're kind of just like exposed to the middle of this, what I assume is the nuclear reactor. Seems like that's a lot of radiation for multiple living beings to be exposed to without there being long-term effects. But
no, I think they're fine. They might be sterile, but they're fine.
They're all they're all there. Apparently everything is okay. The giant fire that nearly consumes them, they're fine. Everything's fine. This is fine. They're literally the "this is fine" dog meme, I guess, in the middle of the fire at that point. That's a good cutout for socials right there. A good reel. They're sitting in the middle of that, and just as it appears that Ebon is going to overpower them and take them down, Nightingale steps up and says she's not interested in seeing them do this, and uses her powers to overpower Ebon, who's immediately blinded and distracted. This allows Static to make an escape with Gear in tow behind him. At this point, they all escape. They all run off. And it's very clear that Nightingale is probably going to be in deep trouble once they get back to their hideaway, and it is in fact just that case, as Nightingale is has to explain herself. Ebon is not happy at all. She says that he promised that no one would get hurt. He tries to explain away and say that, well, Static and Gear are nobodies, so hurting them wasn't going to be an issue. He's obviously very upset that she got in the way of being able to defeat them. So he runs away, or he takes her through a portal, drops her off in the middle of a crater someplace that has a lot of lights. Is it like
a construction site? Like I don't know. It's just like a vacant lot with a hole in it and some big like floodlights, like baseball stadium floodlights, not like spotlights.
Yeah, these things are humongous. They are the city council must have gotten quite the budget for lights this year in Dakota City, in order to properly provide light for this area. Well, Ebon knows that light is of course the poison to these. Specifically to Nightingale, so he's going to teach her a lesson by killing her? ? So he flips on the lights and is able to. It starts torturing her, nearly killing her. And as she covers her eyes, Static shows up. Thankfully, I guess I don't know. Maybe this wasn't too far away, and Static heard her screaming or something. It's not really explained how he was so quick to find her because. I don't know. He just is able to stumble upon her. And we have a little bit of a battle that occurs between Static and Gear and the rest of the Nightbreed crew as he attempts to rescue Nightingale. Brickhouse gets involved. Fade gets involved. They're able to defeat them and scatter. And at this point, they decide to retreat. That's when Static and Gear decide to have a little conversation with Miss Nightingale, where we not only learn about why she wasn't on board with Ebon's plan, we learn her backstory and just what Ebon is up to, all in one very, very long
So, Gail,
scene.
how'd a nice girl like you end up so, metahuman?
I guess just like everyone else. I was down at the docks the night the police tried to stop the gang war. Nobody realized the kind of chemicals they were storing down there. And then it happened. The Big Bang. Not only were we all changed, but some of us got a really bad surprise the next morning. The sun had turned deadly for us. It could reduce us to ashes. We ran for any dark place we could find. That's how we met each other. Brickhouse, Fade, Tech, and me. And we weren't the only ones. At night, when we tried to get help, people were frightened. All they had to do was see our eyes, and they knew. The more the above-grounders feared us, the more we didn't trust them. So we kept to ourselves and became a family. We called ourselves the Nightbreed. We started to steal to stay alive. That's how we met Ebon.
Yes, it's time for the secrets of Nightingale's past and how she came to be. So we find out that it is, what else? It's the Big Bang, which I don't know if we talked about this at the time. Dakota SWAT team right up there with Gotham SWAT team as far as guys that just make things worse. They are escalators.
Mm-hmm.
They are not problem solvers. They escalate by shooting live rounds into a chemical storage facility or whatever was going on in the docks that night. Anyway, yes, we see the flashback. She was one of many people on site for that gang violence, that we saw all the way back in the pilot episode. See in here. I don't know where to put this. I guess we could put this in visuals. Hot Streak is briefly seen in this flashback, but he's wearing a bandana, which he was not wearing in the original episode. So, whatever. I guess
Sure.
she just remember. This is her memory, so she remembers seeing Hot Streak wearing a bandana. He would never put a bandana on because the hair is too high. It wouldn't work.
She remembers him being a huge fan of 80s and 90s pro wrestler Hulk. That's how she sees him in her brain. She's like, oh yeah, Hot Streak, big NWO guy.
Oh, for sure. That makes as much sense as anything. But yes, as it continues, yes, we find out that not only did she get her special powers of darkness, she got a nasty surprise when she woke up the next morning, and the sun was now poisonous to her. According to her, it can reduce her to ash if she stays in the light long enough. So she, along with several others, seek shelter, and she makes it down into this abandoned subway. And that's where she meets Fade, Tech, and Brickhouse. And this is an interesting plot point because it's brought up and then never addressed again. There are apparently like dozens of other Nightbreed that we just never see in this episode, but they like pan over and there's like a bunch, like tens of people, if not hundreds, with these yellow eyes standing in the shadow, implying that their numbers are a lot greater. It isn't just these four. There's quite a few of them, but we don't ever see the rest of them. So I don't know if they're just like further down the tunnels somewhere, or if they're not part of this group. I don't know. But regardless, we see that Fade and Brickhouse and Tech and Nightingale all sort of slowly start making their way into the city at night, trying at first to look for help, but everyone is scared of them because of their weird eyes. I feel
speaking of inept, the entire Dakota Police Department should be reprimanded because these are weaponized, deputized members of the law, a force in Dakota, and they are terrified of people because of the way that their eyes look.
That cop in that flash, he just like, oh, lizard eyes, and then he bear maces them.
What the heck?
Like, and also by the second week of the Big Bang, there's like Purple Hulk guys and kids that can turn toys into giant dinosaurs and stuff. Like, I feel like maybe if they had just waited another week, they might have been all right. But then the episode couldn't have happened, as we often say. So they, after a few weeks of being ostracized when they asked for help, they decided they're going to strike out on their own. They go out at night to steal in order to survive originally, but eventually they do, in fact, meet Ebon on the night of one of their heists, and he tells them he has a grander plan for them, that he wants to blanket the whole city in darkness.
He was real interested in my power. Said it gave him ideas. So he had Tech analyze it. The Big Bang had turned Tech into the smartest person in Dakota.
Well, Gear might disagree.
But we should never have helped Ebon. He's crazy.
Oh, it doesn't take brains to figure that out. What's he up to this time?
He wants to block out the sun. We've been stealing parts for a machine that Tech is building. He calls it the Blackout Box. Ebon wants to set it off where no one will see it. Once that happens, it'll spread dark matter all over the sky and make Dakota dark forever. Then, Ebon wants all of the Nightbreed to take over the city, with him in control.
As what? Mayor Ebon? More like King Ebon.
I don't know why it being dark means that, like he's still going to have to fight Static and Gear and the cops, and presumably, if it got out of hand, the Justice League eventually. So I don't know how making it dark, like, solves all of this, but I guess if it's constantly, like, pitch black, it's harder. I don't know. It's not exactly clear, but that's his plan. They've built this device, and so now Static, Gear, and Nightingale head back to their headquarters, to the Nightbreed's headquarters, hoping to stop it. But as they get there, Ebon is waiting for them, and for I believe the fourth week in a row, Cal, it's a trap. As Ebon quickly escapes through his portal thing that he can do, and he has a comically like Old West TNT like plunger thing that you press down to set off the demolition in the tunnels. There's a bunch of explosions. The subway tunnel starts to collapse around them. Instead of flying them all out, Static, Gear, and Nightingale run deeper into the tunnels. And Static's able to shield them for a little while, but it looks like it might be curtains for our heroes. But then Brickhouse shows up and saves the day, having shown a little bit of softness earlier in defending Nightingale. She comes back to save them from certain doom. And as they head off for their final battle, they find out that the place where they are going to set off this bomb is none other than right in front of the gas station that Virgil and Richie hang out when they're not patrolling. So I guess they didn't have to pay for a new background. I don't know. I just think it's funny that it's in front of the gas station. But
it happens to be right in the middle of the city, dead in the middle. Go figure.
Yeah, how about that? But yes, we get there. So we arrive at the scene. Ebon, Tech, and Fade are planting the bomb, about to set it off. Static, Gear, Brickhouse, and Nightingale arrive, and we do some punching and some zapping. And perhaps surprisingly, even though it looks like for a moment that Static and Gear have the upper hand, they run out of time, and the bomb goes off, and the city begins to get blanketed in dark shadow.
Yeah, that seems to be that our heroes have failed, but I guess at some point they established that Nightingale can absorb the darkness. I don't remember that being established before this scene, but maybe they mentioned it at some point. But so Static asks Nightingale to try and absorb the darkness that has the dark matter that has escaped the bomb, as they attempt to disable and take down Ebon and the rest of the Nightbreed that are, well, I guess it's not the rest of the Nightbreed because it's just two of them. It's Fade and Tech, and Tech has a gun, and Fade is just kind of like running around diving at people. So they do their best to dispose of them, and meanwhile Nightingale is trying her best, and we get the classic, "Can you do this? I don't know. I'm gonna give it a try." And then, as Nightingale attempts to absorb all the dark matter, there's a lot of yelling and screaming and gasping and groaning and attempting to absorb all of it. And it appears at the very end she is able to absorb all of it. In the meantime, Richie is able to, or Gear is able to, get over to the bomb and begin disabling it, despite the warnings that Tech has given him that the wrong thing could cause the bomb to explode. He's able to pretty easily disable the bomb, then begins working on getting the rest of the crew underground because the sun is coming up. So in order to make sure that they don't have an adverse reaction to the upcoming sun, the rest of the Nightbreed head underground with Static and Gear, and Ebon is there left sort of shaking his fist saying, "But you work for me." But they just leave him there, like he's not taken away, he's just forgotten about. They just had to run underground so quick that they forgot about him. It's
kind of unclear what exactly. I guess he was just nice to them, and that's why they were doing what he was saying. Like, there isn't the scene where they try to walk away earlier, but he's like, "Aha, but if you do that, I'll do this." And so they're all like kowtowing to him.
Right.
He's just like, "You can't. Why can't they?"
Right.
I guess he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy, and he's
a bad guy, and he thinks the bad guys should stick together, even though he's proven time and again that he can't work with other bad guys either. So
Ebon is canceled for being a hypocrite.
Right. Precisely. So as they head underground, Static and Gear have conversations with this Nightbreed crew. As they begin to sort of talk about what their next steps are, they discuss. Richie discusses himself and Tech putting their heads together to come up with some sort of cure for them. And it's at this point that Fade steps up and says, no, they have to work on this by themselves. And for some reason, they're going to all disappear into the shadows. And
we could have had Dakota again. Slept in our own cribs.
Wrong, Fade. It's like Nightingale said before. We'd have traded one dark world for another.
Maybe we can find some way to get you all back to normal.
Yeah, if Tech and I both put our minds to it.
No, I'll never trust the above grounders. We Nightbreed have to solve our problems by ourselves.
He's right. I should have been working on a cure all along. I'll start now, and I will find one.
Wait! People will help if you give them a chance.
Sorry, Static. It's human nature to be afraid of the dark. And we are the dark.
But how will you survive?
We'll find a way. And remember, you have friends in the shadows of the night.
Nightingale reminds Static and Gear that they have friends that live in the shadows, and then they just disappear. So even though they stole a whole bunch of stuff and were bad, right up until the point they ran into the subway tunnel, at least half of them, they are just gone and disappeared, and Static doesn't do anything about it. So they're gone, and as we wrap up the episode, Static and Gear walk up from the subway tunnel into the light, talk about grabbing some breakfast, and that's the end of our episode.
Yeah, so trying to think of how to best sum this up.
An episode.
It sure is. That's one way to say it. So I like the general concept of, a more harsh mutation as a result of the Big Bang. Not everybody got cool, easy to use powers or whatever. In this case, their powers aren't really that remarkable. Mm-hmm. It's just that they also have this condition where they can't go in the sun. That's kind of interesting, and it kind of allows you to do the X-Men, the Morlocks, the mutants who live in the sewers thing, mm-hmm. Which I think itself is based on an H.G. Wells novel. But so it's kind of a fun concept to do that, to be there's this whole other society of metahumans living in Dakota that Static's never met before. It's okay, that's kind of interesting. Having Ebon be their leader makes sense. I like that, and him kind of taking advantage of their naivete a little bit. But in concept, whenever the plan is to just make a big bomb that's going to shoot something into the sky, I'm not generally a fan of episodes that have that as the result. And also it's okay, so he makes it permanently dark or permanently nighttime in the city. How exactly does that help him achieve his goals of ruling the city, which I guess is what he wants to do? I don't know. It's I like the concept. It's kind of interesting. The ending is kind of has that interesting turn where Static and Gear want to keep helping them and want to help them work on the cure, and they kind of retreat back into their bubble, because they, even after all this, they don't really trust because of how they've been burned before. It's okay, that's an interesting commentary on the ostracized and the various minorities faced in their mm-hmm. lives. I'm sure I think there's something interesting there, but that feels a little just tacked on at the end.
Yeah.
It's well, we have to stay in the sewers, and we won't accept any help from outsiders because we don't trust it. You don't trust Static and Gear, who you just helped prevent your boss from achieving the thing you guys have been working on for a year or however long.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think in concept, interesting. In execution, not very interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was very disappointed, especially it's hard after last week's episode that we felt was just executed so well. It was so fun. Mm-hmm. Paid homage to so many great things in comic book history, and had a great story from start to finish and good music. And then this just kind of feels like a a wet balloon. It's just not great. And it starts, there are pieces there that are okay, like you said, like this idea of a gang, and if there was more of a motivation for them to join up with Ebon, I think that would have made sense. Like, hey, we feel like we're outcast and we have nowhere else to run is kind of what they say. But also it's more that like they just want to blot out the sun so that they can go live in their houses. Like Fade literally says that at one point. Like we could have been he says that at the end, like we could have been back at my own crib living there. So it's not like they're not motivated by feeling like outcasts, other than it's sort of explained that way in Nightingale's exposition, but then that doesn't feel like the rest of the team's motivation. It just feels like they just want to live normal lives, but they can't because of the sun, not because of how they were treated by other people. At least that's not the main motivation for them. I feel like also there were parts of the story that felt like they were out of order from what I would normally expect. Like I was sitting here kind of thinking, I'm like, I think if you did the opening scene and Nightingale, she abandons that crew or decides that she's not going to help or double crosses Ebon in that opening scene. Static saves her. You get the exposition. She's helping Static. Something happens where they're able. You still kind of follow the same pattern, but you have more of a build up to this final battle between Ebon, Fade, who feels forgotten a lot in the middle of it. Like he literally just pops up 2 times. Like he's not really useful. And then Tech, who he's supposed to be super smart, but he's kind of just relegated to he has a laser weapon and he's the guy that builds the bomb. Like he doesn't have any other weapons that he's developed or anything that could have, you could show off or reinforce that he's the brains behind the thing. That's one thing. The other thing that I mentioned before we went on the air, but this feels very much like nowadays what you would see for a what they call a backdoor pilot, or like you're setting up a spin-off for a show. And I didn't see anywhere on the Static Wiki, and I'd be curious to perhaps, if we were ever afforded the opportunity to speak to some of the show's creators and creative minds behind it, it would be interesting to know, was that something that they were kind of shooting for or talking about? Because the fact that the whole episode hangs on with, oh, Static, you have friends that live in the shadows, and I don't know whether or not they knew that this was the last season of the show or not, but it feels like they're leaving a bit of a cliffhanger there. You're introducing these 4 different characters. They have this team aspect of things. Maybe you're looking to bring them back for a 5th season of Static, or maybe you're trying to set up a spin-off show that you can get with these, they're helping the other Bang babies that are afflicted with that same disease or something. I don't know. But because of that, it just feels like so much of the story is disjointed and out of place, and you rely so much of the episode on that little block of exposition that Nightingale does, where you tell this long story of how and why, who they are, why they're there, as opposed to sort of just kind of revealing it. We already knew they were Bang babies, right? Is that a surprise? we're 40 some episodes into the 44 episodes is the 44th episode of production. We've done 43 episodes that have pretty much all featured Bang babies prior. With the exception of maybe 1 or 2, last week's episode notwithstanding. But Static is a Bang baby, so I guess they've all featured Bang baby. But most of them feature a Bang baby villain of some kind. Right. So was it necessary to go back that far to explain? Couldn't she have just said, yeah, we were Bang babies? Like, why did that portion of it have to go? I don't know. That's why it felt even more like, oh, this is a backdoor pilot. We're establishing this because we're showing this. We might have to show this as the pilot some other time. So yeah, I felt like it was not a particularly well put together episode.
Yeah.
I think maybe there are pieces of it that could have worked. but it also feels somewhat formulaic of the girl that's going to defect from the bad guys because she's got a good heart and doesn't agree with it, and then she's the person that has to save the day at the end ultimately to show how good she is. It's like, all right, I've seen that a couple of times. So I didn't really care for this episode. It's hard not to score things based on how well we enjoyed last week's episode, but that may somewhat influence my score here. But I ended up going with a 4 out of 10 for plot, just because I did not love this, and I felt like the bar has been set. We can tell really good, interesting static stories. We've seen those, and feels like there were elements that could have been interesting here. We love most of the episodes that have Ebon in them, and this one feels like a wasted effort as far as I'm concerned. So that's reflected in my score of 4 out of 10.
Yeah, I gave it the same score of 4. Also, just as like a logistical thing, they established that, in fact, as we mentioned, there's this whole death trap scene where Ebon turns these lights on to fry Nightingale. So it's not just the sun that hurts them, yet Nightingale is like sitting on a bench in the middle of the city. It's all lit up, and it's talking to Gear and Static, and doesn't appear to have any issues. It's not like she's like, they all are. They're all walking around at night and not in like just in like dark alleys and things like that. So like what lights do and don't affect them seems a little inconsistent.
Agreed.
I don't know. It's just like when you introduce a thing, like if they had just said the sun, I think they could have done most of what they did here. I guess you wouldn't have had that, or just like really intense light. But you said any light could kill, could hurt them or kill them at one point, and then they're walking around. There is still light out in Dakota, even if it's at night. The moon is light, like it's all. So I don't know. I would have liked a little bit more clarification on that. That's a little nitpicky. I think my main issues were, if the episode starts with Nightingale is just on the run after having already left the breed, and she runs into Static and Gear, and then they're trying to put together who she's running from and what's going on, and then you find out Ebon's involved. Like there's probably a structural way you could, like you said, instead of having her be part of it, be part of the group, then immediately kind of turn on them when they try to hurt Static, and then hemming and hawing, and then getting captured, and then Static has to come rescue her, and then I don't know. It just, again, it feels like, well, we had to kill 21 minutes, so we couldn't have her join the Static until the 11-minute mark or whatever.
Right.
So that's kind of what's just. It is worth probably noting here all of those Nightbreed characters that they introduce are characters from the pre-existing Milestone universe. Some of them part of the Blood Syndicate group, which I think some of their origin that they showed off in this episode comes from that. As the aftermath of the Big Bang, a bunch of different gangs, sort of remnants, formed this new group called the Blood Syndicate. So I know Tech and Fade, I think, are both part of that in the comics. So that's a neat little inclusion to get a few more of those Milestone originals into the show. But unfortunately, didn't result in a particularly interesting or compelling episode, as evidenced by our 4 out of 10s from both of us. But that will move us on to visuals and animation. Cal, now this week we do actually have a director credited, Mark J. Howard as the director. Animation once again by Dong Wu. My first thought, I'll throw it over to you in a moment, is that, and we're gonna have to watch more season 4 to figure out if this is a permanent thing. Ebon's skinny now. He's like skinny in a way that he wasn't, I feel like, even in the 3rd season of the show.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not just the redesign. Like he's very svelte now in a way that I don't feel like he was in previous appearances. So I don't know if this is if he will return to normal, or if this was just like another slight tweak on his design between seasons. But he's got like a more pronounced jawline, I feel like, now, and he's a bit more svelte.
Yeah, it's almost like they went, I don't know, I feel like before he was kind of drawn like a stretchy guy, where his limbs and torso and stuff weren't necessarily designed to look like a human model. I know there were some times where he was walking around where that would be the case, but in my mind, he's just a little bit more angular and not quite it doesn't, everything doesn't quite line up looking like a human character model. Everybody in this episode is very square and very character model-y in their design and how they're standing and how they walk and everything. Dongwoo doing the animation, I think, has some inconsistent results, to say the least, I'd say. And I think this is one of those where there's a lot in this episode that feels stiff, I would say, which is weird when you have multiple characters that are working with like dark matter and things that are supposed to be sort of flowy and not quite liquid, but yeah, just not a solid form. And so much of the stuff that isn't that feels very, very stiff and square and like it doesn't move smoothly. I was expecting, again, an Ebon episode. You're expecting something a little bit maybe stronger from your individual individual scenes. You don't get a lot. Ebon opens up a lot of portals in this episode. A lot of Ebon portals. Not a lot of him doing stretching or showing his other powers off. It's a lot of him just dropping people through portals and them just kind of hanging there or disappearing. I did like the visualization, at least for the first part. They only did it one time, but the visualization of Nightingale's powers when Static gets trapped at the beginning, as the rest of the Nightbreed are escaping, she uses her powers to black out, and we get a POV shot of Static in the middle of the Nightingale's powers, and it's all bright. Interestingly, it's all bright and white around him, so he can't see anything. And then he runs into a pole, which kind of knocks him back out as the powers dissipate. Yeah. But I thought that was interesting. I would have liked to have seen more of that, because usually with Ebon's powers, the room just gets super dark, and we saw that a couple of different times here. I didn't love the idea. Also, it didn't scream to me when they released the dark matter at the end that it was like they put like a darker film over the scenes. It was not screaming, this is like a darkness that will make people leave Dakota. It was just kind of like a little shade darker. Like somebody just turned the brightness down like 2 notches. I wouldn't want to live in a place where it's like that 24/7, but it didn't feel like it was all that bad. Like there could have just the government could have just brought in some giant floodlights and taken care of that if that was the case, if it was quote unquote permanently dark there. I don't know. Things that I did like, I did like portions of the exposition. I thought it was interesting when as you talked about, when they get down to the subway after they've had their interactions with humans and police officers, and they're forced to head down to the subway as Nightingale is telling the story of their origins, and you just see this group of people, even though they're never mentioned again and we don't know who they are, the people that are down there, you just kind of see this silhouettes, and then all of a sudden all of their eyes kind of open up at the same time, and you see the similar yellow reptilian eyes that all of them have. I thought that was at least interesting. The fight scene at the construction site is chopped up real bad. I don't know what happened. It looked like, I don't know. This is one of those cases where we're speculating that maybe the animation didn't come back real well, or something, but it is chopped to bits. The cuts that they made and some of the fades that go in and out from scene to scene, just not really interesting. I feel like there's a lot of scenes that I was just like, why are we watching this? Like there's Static getting a soda out of the soda machine.
That is that's a very long. Like they linger on it too. Like,
yes. It's like
why? They like pan down the machine to let you know it's a soda machine, and then you see the zap hit the button, or no, the Zap puts the coin into the slot. Then the Zap hits the button. Then we watch the can drop out into the thing. Then he picks it up. Then he pops it with the thing, and then he like zaps it over to Gale sitting on the bench. Like it's like 35 seconds of of this episode is just watching Static get a can of soda out of a vending machine.
It's like,
so I guess just to show off. He's just being a show off, I guess.
And like if it was like a flirtatious thing and you're trying to drive home that he's like flirting with her, it would be one thing. But that's not that's not established in this episode. He's not really flirting with her. It's just, and it's fine. Like you can show Static using his powers, but the only thing that I thought was interesting was I liked that he steals Backpack to use him as a static saucer on
that is neat.
Falling towards the middle of the reactor. As they're free falling, he steals, because Richie is knocked out, he steals Backpack and uses him as a static saucer to fly out of the reactor. But that was really the only thing that I was like, yeah, this is really good. I was disappointed on several other things that I've already mentioned. I think that this episode probably should have been a little bit more interesting and could have showed a little bit more of the powers of the other heroes. Brickhouse looks cool, even though it's kind of a character that we've already, like the big muscular person that got the powers. They're like big and muscular, but her skin actually like turns into, she's like She-Thing, right? She's like the She-Thing, I guess it would be. She's like Lady Thing. She's kind of turns into, she's got a brick texture to her skin when her powers turn on, which is kind of interesting. Fade's powers are not all that different than Ebon or anybody else. He just doesn't have the cool portal that lets him into the wall. He just kind of fades into the wall. And then Tech, as we mentioned, doesn't really exhibit any physical powers. He's just kind of smart, and he has a green laser that he shoots. So Nightingale's interesting, but again, it's not all that different than Ebon's powers. And even at the end, I guess the sequence where she's supposed to be absorbing is interesting because there's lots of cuts to her face and seemingly being in agony and pain as she's attempting to absorb all of the dark matter. But I think just it not feeling, because it didn't feel like it was all that darker or more dark than we had just previously been, it didn't feel like it was having the impact. Like I almost would have rather it. What they could have done, and I'm doing a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking here for this episode, but you established at the beginning that Nightingale's dark matter covering everything turns everything white, actually, and turns it bright. So it would have been interesting for everything to kind of go, I know that's antithetical to what they're explaining, that everything's going to go dark, but that's what the powers would have looked like to people that don't have these yellow lenses for eyes, right? So maybe you get a POV shot from Static and Richie and everything is completely white and they can't see anything, and that would have kind of pushed this idea that like this is an unlivable condition. Or just make it pitch black. Like have some characters' eyes poke out or something. I don't know. A Static uses his electricity to like create a little bit of light, something that could have made this a little bit more drive this point home that this is an unlivable condition that needs to be reckoned with. And I just don't think that was driven home here. So I've talked a lot. I ended up giving animation and visuals a 5 out of 10 just because I was a little disappointed in everything. What about you?
Yeah, I gave it a 6 out of 10. I was a little nicer, but yeah, I don't disagree with anything you've said. The cuts in the construction site battle really noticeable. There's a bit which something about talking about liking the execution, but not liking the idea, but not the execution. Where I think Nightingale uses her powers on Tech when he has that green laser at the end. And so the screen goes black and then it lights up and you can see Tech when he fires the gun, and then it fades again. And he fires the gun again and then it fades again. But they're not really making it look like he's not like bathed in green light, like, because that's the only light source. So theoretically that should be like he should be green. Like everything should be green because that should be the only light like coming out of that. But instead, we just kind of see it just looks like the camera's blinking or something. Like, so neat idea. Maybe not, maybe not the right animation studio to pull off a trick like that. But I think there's some neat ideas. I do like the bit where I think it's in the construction fight where Ebon just like grows extra hands and is shooting them out at Static, and Static's trying to fly and avoid getting grabbed by like 5 or 6 different Ebon hands at once. I think that's a neat little bit of Ebon, another character whose powers are what they need to be when they need them to be. Mm-hmm. He can stretch, he can shapeshift, he can make portals, he can blow up things with giant Yosemite Sam TNT buttons. I think that's about all I had as well for visual notes. The sepia tone of the flashback, kind of a neat touch, even though it's a flashback to season 1 of the show, not like to the 70s.
Right.
That's all right. I think it's a fine little device to show that this is the before times. I wish I had more to say. Like the brick house design I kind of like. I feel like they could have done more, speaking of which, and this might go more back to plot, but like there's a little bit of banter between them, which maybe we'll get to in voice acting, but like Gear and Tech don't really have like a face off. Mm-hmm. Which if you have evil Bang Baby genius and superhero Bang Baby Jesus genius, like how do we not have like a hack off or something at some point in the episode? But we don't really get much from them working together. Gear himself kind of useless for most of this episode, honestly. Other than I guess he and Backpack turn off the bomb at the end. But yes, all that being said, those are our visual scores, and that will move us on to music. This episode we have, as Max mentioned, Max Gauss, or Gauss, apologies, and Stanley Clark responsible for music. I've got to be honest, my music note section completely blank. I did not really notice. Did not really notice music hardly at all, other than maybe some, what you would expect in the static fight scenes, but not a particularly memorable musical episode, I didn't think.
Disappointing. I think knowing that Richard Wolff has kind of had set up the first 3 seasons to have this specific unique sound, as we've talked about. Again, it's an acquired taste, one that I have learned to appreciate, but in a way it does feel like it's missed here. You don't even get the static theme at any point during the episode that I noted. Most of it is just sort of background music, and you get a little bit of, it's mostly synthesizer and stuff that just accentuates whether it's when they're flying from scene to scene, or punctuates a line or a joke here or there. It's not really memorable in any way. There was one song that had some sort of lyrics to it. It's which happens during the final scene once the bomb has been detonated, or prior to the bomb being detonated, but you can't even hear the lyrics to the song. It's very muffled. I did think it was interesting. I don't know. We'll have to see once we've reviewed more episodes from season 4 if they were going this route, but when Gear disables the bomb, they intentionally made it sound, I wrote down techie disarmament music. Like it's just like high-pitched beeps and tweaks that kind of make it sound like if you had to write a musical piece of a computer genius disabling a bomb, these are the sounds that I would use. Like that's and that's all accompanied as Gear is disabling the bomb. That was one note that I took note of, and then the rest of it is just kind of background music. Something interesting that I did pick up on, and I don't know if it was intentional or just a coincidence. And obviously, this is the DCAU, but there was another Batman show that was running or premiering at the time that this Static show was on Kids WB. And when he mentions Batman, there's sort of like that Batman riff from the Batman that plays. It's not straight up, but it is as Gear and Static are talking about Batman's secret identity, there is just sort of a riff that plays. So maybe it was intentional, maybe it's not. I don't know when the Batman premiered, whether that wasn't until December or September of 2004. I can't remember. So it might have been pre that existing and just a coincidence, but that did perk my ears up. Other than that, nada. I got nothing. As far as music is concerned. And because it's disappointing and you kind of have an established sound here, and I think that probably could have at least heightened some of the excitement for some of those scenes that we were a little bit disappointed in. I ended up giving music 4 out of 10. It's just a little bit disappointing. It's just kind of filler and not what we're used to or what we expect from a Static episode as far as being a very clear part of the episode.
Yeah, just being on that, I didn't really pick anything up positive or negative. I just gave it our run of the mill 5 out of 10 for myself. Nothing. I didn't notice anything that I didn't like. I just didn't really pick up on a lot that I appreciated either. So, yeah, just kind of a non-factor, unfortunately, because as we've talked about, sometimes the music can be what lifts up an episode if we're not loving the plot so much. But that will bring us to our final category here, Cal, which of course is voice acting. Not a big cast today.
Yeah, not a big one at all, actually. We have just kind of a normal bit of actors and actresses here. So of course, we'll start with our returning Gary Sturgis, once again voicing Ebon. Liam, you and I have a particular affinity for Gary Sturgis's performance as Ebon because it's basically, as we've established on each and every Ebon episode, it's basically just Ice-T. Sounds like he's doing rapper/actor Ice-T impersonation. And if you've never tried to do an Ice-T impersonation, stop what you're doing right now and go listen to him and then try and do one because you probably can do one. You probably aren't aware that you can do an Ice-T impersonation. That being said, Gary Sturgis's Ebon is the Ice-T impersonation of Ice-T impersonations. It's top notch. It's just kind of very matter of the fact, and he doesn't have a lot of dialogue in this episode because he sort of takes a back seat to the rest of the Nightbreed. But his closing line of "But you work for me," I did laugh at that. It's unintentionally very funny. So with that, we'll go ahead and talk about some of the other members of our aforementioned new breed, or Nightbreed rather, not the new breed. New breed's a different group. We had Dawn Lewis, who is playing Brickhouse, and Miss Lewis is probably best known for her appearances. She was on the ABC sitcom Hanging with Mr. Cooper, which is probably has a cult following because that was part of that. Kids from that era probably watched that show. She was also on A Different World in the late 80s, which is a show that ran for about five years. Unfortunately, not a ton for Miss Lewis to do. She has a little bit of back and forth between her and Nightingale. But not a ton to call upon her for her expertise in voice acting. I guess maybe at the end, as she's sort of explaining to the rest of the crew why living in a city that's been completely blacked out, even for them, it might be good for them, but losing the opportunity for everybody else to live in that area, the greater good, I guess. So she does get a bit of a redemption arc there. So it's interesting to see. She's initially kind of short with Nightingale at the beginning, but she sort of has that redemption arc at the end.
Yeah, I think she does a solid job with what's asked of her. She other than Nightingale is kind of the only Nightbreed who gets to be more than like a a one note, as we'll get to with our next actor in the moment here. So yeah, she's good and solid. It feels like, yeah, there maybe could have been more. Again, like you said, maybe if there had been subsequent episodes that featured these characters, maybe she could have expanded on the role a little bit. But yeah, as it stands, she's just kind of the tough girl with the heart of gold, as it turns out.
That's right. Rounding out before we get to probably, I guess, the main member of the night brood night breed, we have actor Freddie Rodriguez, who is playing both Fade and Tech. So both voices provided by Mr. Rodriguez, and he's probably best known for well, DC fans would know him. He played Minos in Teen Titans, who were on 5 episodes of that. He's also been in Young Justice. He once again played Minos on Teen Titans Go. He's done a lot of voice acting. Ultimate Spider-Man. He played Spider-Man 2099. Lots of voice acting things to his credit. Danny Phantom, lots of stuff. But he's also, of course, he's also done live acting as well in a bunch of different movies, and provided voices also in a bunch of different things. Some video games. Huge actor here. It looks like he was even nominated for an Emmy Award for 6 Feet Under, the HBO series. So lots of stuff on his resume here, and I would say he plays Fade, who does not have a lot of screen time, as we mentioned, doesn't have a lot to say. And I would say Fade's,
yeah, he's a little nasally too. Like I thought he just had a deviated septum. Like
he's holding his nose the entire time.
Yeah, he's super nasally. But yeah, there's a touch of some sort of not 100% sure what it's meant to represent. But yeah, it's not like it shows his versatility. Fade doesn't really have a personality, if I'm being honest. So at least he gets to show a little bit of a quirk and a little bit of his skills as an actor to be able to provide two pretty unique voices in the same show. But yeah, it's again, neither of them really have that much interesting to say. Like I said, I feel like they missed a trick not having Tech face off with Gear a little bit more directly. But yeah, as it stands, I don't think he does a bad job, certainly. And again, having to voice 2 characters in the same show is never easy. But yeah, that's a good solid job.
And then rounding out our Nightbreed characters, playing Nightingale is Miss Colleen O'Shaughnessy. So Colleen is probably best known for her work in Digimon. She played Sora Takenouchi in the Digimon anime. She also played Jazz Phantom in Danny Phantom. Voiced the Wasp in the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon, and
she's in a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog stuff too.
Yeah,
right?
She's done Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, and 3, and also appeared in the recent Knuckles show, the Paramount exclusive. So yeah, she's done a ton of voice acting, lots of animation stuff to her credit. This episode of Static is her only DCAU appearance, but I think she's fine. I mean, I don't think that she would. It's unlikely that she would have as many voice acting roles to her credit in some very high-profile animated films and animes that, without being somewhat talented, I think she's able to at least somewhat communicate that conflicted characterization that this Nightingale character has, where she is supposed to, she's not evil. She's doing this because she feels like she has to do this, or she's kind of like going along with everything because she doesn't have a strong personality. And Ebon is really using her powers because she's really the strongest out of all of them to try and manipulate and use her. So I think she does a fine job. It's not by any means, I think, award winning or anything. There wasn't anything that I felt that stood out as like, yeah, this is a scene that I'm gonna remember forever. But I didn't think anything was offensive. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I think she does a solid job. She provides, I think, the sympathetic character that because she has to lift so much of this episode, she has to do this whole section where she narrates all the flashbacks. She's, like we said, she's really outside of a little bit with Brickhouse, as you mentioned, she's really the only member of the Night breed that feels like anything resembling a three-dimensional character. So yeah, she's got a lot of heavy lifting to do. So I think she has a solid job. She didn't blow me away at any point, but I think her bouncing off Gary Sturgis as Ebon, as we already talked about, there's a good contrast there of just the cold, calculating bad guy, and her being a little bit more squeamish when it comes to violence and all these other activity that Ebon has them up to. So I think she does a good job playing off of the rest of the cast.
And that's right, Liam. And as you mentioned, not a huge cast, so that means we only have our stars of the episode: Jason Marsden playing Gear and Phil Lamar playing Static. And as we mentioned, so much of the episode tends to be kind of overshadowed, pun intended, by the Night breed and what's going on with them. But we do get some nice dialogue between Static and Gear, as we mentioned. I think the one that stands out and probably is the most memorable is the conversation around Batman somehow. But I thought that was fun. And then I guess them sort of coordinating and trying to figure out how to disable the bomb at the end. And then as they kind of walk off arm in arm at the end, as the sun is coming up. But I thought it was solid performances by both Mr. Marsden and Mr. Lamar, as we've come to expect.
Yeah, he doesn't get Jason doesn't get a lot to do in this episode, as mentioned, maybe to the show's detriment there. I do really like, as you already talked about, the little back and forth they have about Batman is pretty funny. And that Gear just kind of just twigs it out of nowhere and it's like, oh, he's a rich guy. That's how this works. Like, I think that's kind of a fun scene. But yeah, and then I think maybe at the end when they're kind of trying to appeal to Gale and the rest of the Nightbreed to stay in touch and to let them help, and she's kind of pulling away. I think Phil Lamar gets a little bit to do there, but tries to flex his muscles a little bit, and they're trying to be sensitive to this Nightbreed that they're just now learning about. But yeah, as it stands, not a lot for either of them. It feels like to sink their teeth into in this one.
Yeah, so because of that, because not a lot for our stars, I didn't think that this one particularly blew me away, and that was reflected in my scores. However, I think everybody is solid. There's certainly no bad voices. I think maybe if I want to really split hairs here, I'd probably look at Mr. Rodriguez's tech voice, the nasally tech voice, for whatever reason. Maybe he was just supposed to be a nerd. Like, that was communicating, like, he's kind of nerdy, so you know how he's gonna talk like the one professor on The Simpsons or something. I don't know. But yeah, so for all those reasons, I ended up giving voice acting a 6 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I gave it the exact same score of 6 out of 10. So thought everybody was good. Didn't think anybody was necessarily great. So that will be that. And that will bring us to our final scores here, Cal. And tallying everything up, I have a final score of, it looks like, 21 out of 40.
Yeah, and we were just a couple of points off. I think you scored a higher 1 point in a couple of the categories. So I'm just a couple points below you. I went with a 19 out of 40 for this week's episode. And I guess talking about rewatchability on the grand scheme of things, doesn't feel like this one matters too much because these characters are never seen or heard from again, despite there sort of being a little bit of a cliffhanger there. The story isn't particularly interesting, or at least executed well. The animation doesn't blow me away. And both of our scores were middle of the road, sub middle of the road. So I dare say this one you can put it in the skip it pile because it's just not a great showcase for the show.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, Cal. I just don't see there's not a lot to it. It's a shame because, like we said, it's an interesting concept theoretically. You bring back a fan favorite, Big Bad and Ebon. It could have been a fun one, but alas, that is not to be. And so that will begin to wrap us up here, Cal. Thank you, everybody, for listening, whether you do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the aforementioned Pod Tower YouTube channel, or any of the other podcast apps. We have a few free ways that you can support us. The easiest way is just to subscribe to us wherever you listen. And if that podcast app lets you leave reviews or give star ratings, if you can give us 5 stars, and if it lets you write a review like Apple Podcast does, you can write a review. We'll actually read it on the show if you give us a 5-star review, and we'll read it on the show and even send you a little gift. So I haven't gotten any new ones in a little while, so would appreciate if folks would take the time to do that. I know that takes a little while, but that's a great free way to support the show. Another great way to support the show in a more direct way, of course, is there's a couple of links in the show notes you can look for. One is a donate button. We have a couple of people who are monthly donators, which are unbelievably kind and generous, and we always appreciate them. Another way you could support us monetarily is to head to the shop in our store. You can pick yourself up a hat or a mug or a sticker, anything. And we see a portion of that, so we appreciate it. However you choose to support us, though, we hope you will continue doing so as we look forward to a new month, and not just a returning show. This is actually going to be a brand new show, not just to us, but to the world, Cal, as we kick off something, a new sort of experiment for the month of August.
That's right. It's been years in the making, though. It's a new show, been several years in the making. It feels like a lifetime ago that this show was announced. But as we mentioned on one of our bonus episodes discussing it, the entire month of August is going to be completely and wholly devoted to reviewing Batman Caped Crusader. We're diving in. The episodes are being released on Amazon Prime. All praise Jeffrey Bezos on August the 1st. So that means that the very first review that we'll have to drop, we're reviewing the yet to be titled episode, or at least yet to be revealed title. I guess I'm sure it's been titled. It just has not been revealed to us. The pilot episode of Batman Caped Crusader. We're going to be coming off an exciting week. All 10 episodes are dropping. We are not reviewing all 10 episodes for the month, so it will just be the first 4 episodes, depending on how things are received, how many people are interested in hearing us talk about such a new and recent show as opposed to these decades old episodes. I think will kind of determine how our path forward, but we'd be remiss with all the coverage that we've had and all of the excitement and hype that we've built around this. I think we'd be remiss not to at least try to delve in and see what this new era of the Dark Knight is all about, and we could not be more excited. Very excited to check out that very first episode with you, Liam, on next week's episode.
That is right, Cal. Definitely can't wait. As we said, it's been a long time coming, and the day is nearly upon us here, as we're very excited to look at Batman Caped Crusader all month long in the month of August. But until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.